Here's the application in its current state. We've used events principally to drive what it wants us to see, what we want to see from it, sorry. And now we're going to try and transfer what it's doing into a class-based structure. Forgive me, I can't speak. What we're going to do is we're going to use the form as it is at the moment. And we're going to make sure that it can do what we asked it to do before we go much further. Press the button and it says 25. This is taking the data straight out of there and putting it into a message box. And then this one is taking this date of birth and converting it into an age. Now we're going to build a class that will do that and compare what the person says is their age with what the date of birth is calculating as an age and so forth. So we'll verify that what the person says is the truth, and we'll use a class to do that. Let's have a look at what our code does in the way of calculations at the minute. We're getting the surname from the boxes and the forename from the boxes, and we're getting the age from the box. We have a small function here, which is just a convert, which is built into the C# system itself. And the message box function is another function which is built into the C# system. Then we join the two strings together, which is a concatenation. And then we've got a function which uses the calculate age into an integer from a birthday, which is a date time. So those are the things that we're going to have to try and remember that we have to do when we convert what it does into a class. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a new button which performs the duties that are being performed before, maybe slightly differently, using that button, not that button. So let me just give that button a name. Or sorry, we'll give it the text first. Class button, and the name of it, BTN class button. Then we'll get to its use in just a minute, so let's see how we do adding a class. This is a one project solution. So the solution is the wrapper, which might have several projects inside it, and typically an industrial application would have several projects inside it. We're working with just one. So to add a class to our project, right click it, add class. So let's have a name for this. It's just a normal class, which is selected at the top there, yeah. So we just do it, and I'm going to call this person. Might as well, simple enough name. So a person class has now been added to our system. And it's going to have to be a public class, let's say. So we give it scope, and I'll explain all this in more detail when we talk about it. So I want to just call it a public class so that we can use this class anywhere in the application once we've expanded it a little further. So what we need to do is we need to add some fields and some properties to our class, which are going to handle the forename, the surname, the age, and the birthday. Remember, we're trying to check the age that somebody tells us, and the birthday will work out the age from the date of birth that they give us. So it's a good way of treating those separately, rather than saying that we're always going to calculate the age from the date of birth. So I'm going to create some properties. Now here's what we can do. I'm just going to show you this very quickly. If you start to type prop full, tab, and it's going to give us a skeleton to create our field, which is the private element, and our property, which is the public element. So the int word is highlighted, so I'm going to put a string, and I'm going to call it forename. Notice the convention, we put a lowercase for that, but for the public one, we use uppercase. This is going to act as the public interface for this private string field. So we're going to carry on and do that, and I'll just go ahead and do it, and then I'll show you what I've done in just a moment. I've created some more fields and properties we did forename together, surname, age stated, I've made it the difference from just age, and birthday. So we're going to use exactly what we did before as a calculate age by using the birthday we get. And what you must remember is that this is sitting apart from any interface dealings, and we'll call on this when we need to work things out. This is not connected at the moment in any way to the interface. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new function or method, and I'm going to call it, it's going to be returning a string, and I'm going to call it whole name. So parentheses there, and the workings of the function will go inside, just as we saw before. Now it's giving a message saying it doesn't return a value. That's a really good warning to get. So I'm going to put down return, and then we're going to join the forename and the surname. Notice I'm using the fields rather than the properties, because that's the working part of the class, is to use the fields rather than the properties, so that we can keep whatever we do in here private. The getter and setter, which is up here for forename and surname, remain the public interface, and they'll be used to supply the information that this function needs in order to do its work. Now I'm going to just copy the straight calculate age as we had before, and we're going to put exactly what we've got before, no changes at all. Just to prove that it works, I'm going to build my application, and you'll see that I've got build succeeded. So now that we've got this class, we can start to do things with it. So let's do that next. Here's our class. Let's start to do some things with it, as I've said. Now what we should do is there's no need for us to supply this date time birthday, because we already have a date time birthday. That's why I chose the same name. So we can take that out, and we'll just use the date time birthday field that we've got already established within the class. Now there's another thing that's missing from this particular class, and it's what's called a constructor. Now a constructor is what's used to create an instance of the class with values that you set in advance. It's always public, and it always takes the same name as the class itself. And that's how you create a constructor. And a default constructor can be empty, just like this, or it can be filled with values that you choose to set in advance. So I can put forename equals, oh, it's a string, but we want it to be empty. And there's a thing in C# called string.empty. And that's what we'll do with the others. Notice I've given it age stated because it's an integer. I've given a 0 integer. And for the birthday, I'm going to give it today's date. And we've given it a value which will default to today's date. So it's all initialized, all set up. And it really does help to initialize the fields before we start to use them, because it removes some of the restrictions that we can't do things with uninitialized fields. And that's the process of initializing, supplying a value. Even though that's string empty, it is still a value, and it has initialized our string. Our functions are coming along well here. We've got our calculate age, and we've got our whole name. These are methods that we're using in our class, and I tend to call them functions because they return a value. There's one I'm going to add here, which is going to say that what we're going to get our class to do the work so that it keeps the work that's done independent of the place that it's done. So we're going to put in here a function or method that checks whether the age that's been stated, which is this variable that's going to be supplied into the class, is actually the same as the calculated age. Now I've written it out before, so I'm just going to paste it in and just show you what it's all about. So we've got a public function returning a bool, true or false. We're calling this function checkAge. Now we've got a variable here which is going to be called age by birthday, which is going to be given the value which is worked out by our other method here, calculateAge. We then do an equality check. If age stated equals age by birthday, which is what we've just worked out, will return true, else will return false. And that means that if you change your logic for the way that this is done, you change it once, and whenever you use a person and then call this method, the code is going to work because you changed it once and it will work everywhere. This is a really good way of encapsulating and making sure that you maintain your code more effectively. In the next video, we'll go on to see how we actually use this class in the interface to gather the interface data and then work out whether the person has given us the right age based on their date of birth.